It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And we are exactly 1 month away from night one of the NFL draft. How does that feel?
It's insane that we're so close and that it's going to be here in my city, Green Bay, where we're going to be having the world kind of descend on us, seeing all the preparation around here for the draft. It really helps build the excitement and the anticipation for what's to come and what hopefully we get to spend some time at.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like, just you're driving past and seeing all the shit happening already. And I was just about to say the draft's kind of creeping up on me this year a little bit. I was like, oh my God, like we're already a month away. Like I gotta lock in here. I gotta start reading more mock drafts. I haven't read enough of them. Well, good thing for us. That's exactly what we're here to talk about today. And that is many, many, many mock drafts, because we are taking a look at several of the top analysts and their mock drafts that have been recently put out somewhere in the last week, I think is where every one of these falls. A couple of them were today. But this is always a fun spot on the beginning of our path to the draft, where we start to really think about the NFL draft. This is getting very real now. We've spent a lot of time, a lot of months, a lot of hours breaking down this 2025 Dynasty rookie class. And now, Colin, this is the time of the year where we start to really lock in and think about, okay, these guys are about to go from prospects to NFL players in 1 month from now. And what might that look like?
Yeah, it's kind of surreal seeing the team names attached to the players, and it's only going to get more real as we get closer and some reporters start getting real intelligence and you start to lock down landing spots rather than having it be this kind of ambiguous of like, I think he's going to go in this range, so this team makes sense. I feel like, things are just starting to ramp up and get real. And now is when I'm going to start diving into the mock draft. I was just saying how, like, I've been out on consuming mock drafts and stuff because I want this to have more genuine reactions. And then also, like, I don't know how much mock drafts mean before like a month out, because I don't know if you get any real intel. Like maybe at the combine you get a couple nuggets, but once teams get their full scouting reports and, everybody is on the same page of who they want, what they want, and then, reporters can do a little bit of digging there.
See, I like your strategy because typically how this works is that you start, the first mock drafts start coming out in January, February. You start consuming at that point. And then by the time April hits, you're so full of draft content that it makes you kind of want to burst.
Right.
And in this case, you're just now beginning that process of getting yourself hyped up and reading the stuff. So now by the time the draft comes, you're going to still be locked and loaded. You're going to still be feeling real nice. Meanwhile, the rest of us are like crawling our way to the draft.
Yeah, I'll be fresh. I'm just getting the bullpen, just starting to throw a little bit, and everybody's thrown out and tired by the time we get to draft day.
Well, let's talk about our all-star panel, which has some familiar names from the last 2 years that we've done this, but also a couple of new names. We've also expanded things a little bit. So we're going to kind of split this into two halves. The first half being players that are essentially unanimously being mocked in the first round. And of course, these are our dynasty rookies. So in that group, in that first category of the first round mock drafts, we have, of course, Daniel Jeremiah, dare I say the face of the NFL draft at this point in time. He has become a legend, a superstar. We also have Mel Kiper, the Godfather, another legend of the business, love him or hate him. He is a legend. And then So Dane Brugler, has not put out a mock draft since March 4th, which is pre-free agency, of course. And that didn't feel very genuine because there's certainly picks in that mock that if you looked at it today, you'd say that's probably not going to happen anymore. So in place of Dane, we have some athletic representation, and I thought it was kind of fun to bring in the beat writers mock, which is where each team's beat writer makes the pick for their team. So that's kind of a fun take. So we got that included. Connor Rogers, who, I've said many times is maybe my favorite draft personality at this point, one half of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, but his mock drafts go out on NBC Sports these days. He dropped one today because he knew we needed it for this pod. So thank you, Connor. And fifth, we got a fifth one this year. No Trevor Sikkema, but we're bringing in another veteran from the draft Twitter days, if anybody was there for that in 2013. But we got Kyle Krabs, who is now writing for the 33rd team. He's been kind of all over the place, but he is a very well-established presence in draft Twitter, if that still exists today, which I'd argue that it doesn't, like it once did. But so those are our 5 mock drafts. We're giving ourselves plenty of ammunition here, plenty of different opinions and landing spots to dissect with this first group. And then when we get to the second group, we'll talk about our
we'll clear the bench.
Yeah, we'll clear the bench. We got some people putting out 7-round mock drafts already. I don't know why, but
not me.
We'll bring them in later. But so let's start with the A team and the first round. And instead of going in order of where these players are being picked in the NFL draft, Colin, I thought it might be a fun spin to go in order of where we see the class from a dynasty perspective, starting with 101, which is Ashton Jeanty. But had we gone the reverse, it wouldn't have been much different because we've already reached a point where Ashton Jeanty is unanimously being viewed as a top of round 1 pick in the NFL draft, and deservedly so. We've talked a lot about that. We agree with this, but there are only 2 spots for us to talk about. And it's the 2 spots we've talked the most about already with Jeanty. DJ, Kuiper, and Krabs have Jeanty going number 6 to the Raiders. Meanwhile, Connor Rogers and the beat writers have Jeanty going number 10 to Chicago. So no surprises here. We've talked a bit about this already, but what do you think about the Jeanty spots?
Yeah, I said that after the Geno move, it feels like the Raiders have an identity and they kind of are starting to figure out what they want to do with their team going forward, because it seemed like it was just, I don't know. I don't know what the Raiders are, and they just seem like they're in for another gap year. But you bring in, Pete Carroll and company, and that he's not going to sit and wait a year or draft Shador and try to develop. Like, that never really made sense. So bring in Geno, make some moves in a positive direction, and then go get Ashton Jeanty, the best skill player, maybe second best skill player in the class. Travis Hunter's a skill player, so the second best skill player in the class. And there you go. You have the bones of an offense, and the wide receivers are fine. The O-line is not very good, but I don't know if it matters with Jeanty, and you can always draft O-line later in the draft. So I like that. And then the Bears, I think, would be the ideal pick for Ashton Jeanty in fantasy. I think, with how loaded that team is on the outside with the receivers, so you can't load the box. You got a talented quarterback. You revamp the entire offensive line through free agency. And then you bring in Ben Johnson, who orchestrated one of the best offenses in football the last couple of years. I think that's a recipe for success. So I'd be happy with either, but I'd be way happier And I'd have more faith in Jeanty being like a transcendent dynasty asset if he is on the Bears than if he was on the Raiders.
Yeah, it's a tough spot because as a Packers fan, you don't want to see that happen. But from a fantasy perspective, I'm 100% with you. It's why this was our perfect match spot for Jeanty on Perfect Matches, because of all of the factors that have gone into making this such a great running back spot. No, maybe it's not Jeanty, but whatever back goes here, because I think there will be one of the more premier talents of the class with their, they have 2 picks at the top of round 2. I'd be shocked if they didn't take one at 10, if they didn't get one in that spot. And whoever that player is going to get a little bit of a lightning rod shot for fantasy purposes, because it is they're building it in a way that suggests that they're going to prioritize the run this season based on what we know about Ben Johnson and how the Lions operated. Meanwhile, there is that part of you that sees the Raiders and considers Ashton Jeanty going there, and just there's like this tingle in the back of your neck where you're kind of like, I'm a little bit nervous about this, but you have to then remind yourself that we just did that with Brock Bowers. We did the exact same thing where it was like, man, premier talent, elite, like shouldn't be a problem any spot. And then he goes to the Raiders and you're like, God.
Well, not that spot.
Yeah, please. Why did you have to do that? And then, we saw what happened. So I think this is a different Raiders team. Obviously, Pete Carroll's impact is yet to be, seen for the Raiders, but I would imagine that this season will be at least respectable, especially given that, obviously the fact that they have a quarterback now that we should expect to be at least respectable in Geno Smith. So I'm with you. I don't think either one of these spots would be a bad thing. I'm mostly just glad to see that we are here, that across 5 different mock drafts, we don't have Ashton Jeanty falling out of the top 10. That's the biggest takeaway for me. And I, obviously think that that's where we're headed on NFL draft night.
I just checked real quick. The Ringer mock draft, they have him at 20.
Ooh.
To the Broncos. I like the spot, but I don't think he makes the top 10.
I'd be shocked.
Me too.
But... All right. Well, let's keep talking about running backs, because we're talking about players that are almost unanimous first round selections. And at this point in time, that also includes Omarion Hampton. There was once a point in time where we said, I think he could be a first round pick. I don't think he will be. I think he will go at the top of the second. And we talked about the Browns and those sorts of spots at the top of the second round for Hampton. At this point, it seems like people have completely bought into this, like, if Jeanty is Bijan, then Hampton is Gibbs. Like, that's what we're going to see on draft night, because the spots we have here, earliest is Mel Kiper, 12 to the Cowboys. Then we also have the Broncos at number 20. That was DJ. So that's the spot we just said, Jeanty may be going. Well, here's Hampton in the case that Jeanty does go top 10. And then Connor Rogers has him 21 to the Steelers, and the beat writers had him 22 to the Chargers. Krabs did not include him in the first round. He was the only one. So 12 and then 20, 21, 22. What do you think about that at this point for Omarion Hampton?
I mean, the 12 to the Cowboys seems pretty rich, but like they need a running back in the worst way, and Omarion Hampton's really good. So like I wouldn't put it past them. Like maybe they're putting their eggs in their running back by committee with like washed up guys with Javonte and Miles Sanders, but I'd be very happy if I was a 102 owner and he goes number 12 to the Cowboys, I mean, you got to feel like you struck gold. And then, I mean, any of these teams, honestly, the Chargers would be a little weird because they just paid Najee, but like, I feel like it'd be fine in the long run. But I think that would be the one that you get the most concerned, the most like red flags pop up. But also, he's a first round pick in like I think you feel okay about that. So Cowboys, you feel great. Broncos, you feel, I mean, I think that's the best landing spot in terms of a power vacuum in the running back room, because like I don't even know who they have. Jaleel McLaughlin, like, is that the only guy left behind?
McLaughlin,
Estime, who we love and had last year, and I didn't forget about. And but Steelers have like Jalen Warren around, but obviously Najee leaves there, so I think you feel pretty good about all these spots. I think if he does land at the Chargers, that's where people might overreact a little bit, and I don't think you should.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Hampton is the best running back on all four of those teams if he's drafted there. Like, he is the most talented back in each of these situations. The Chargers is, like you said, the one that is there's some lingering question marks. I don't think any of these other three spots you're super worried about anybody cutting in seriously to the workload. I mean, maybe, and you know, I don't know if I would even consider Hampton a like day one walk into the league and be a top running back. Like, I don't know that I'm even there with him, and I love Hampton. But I don't know that he is like cooked and ready to serve in week one. So I think, you know, in these cases with like the Steelers, where like they keep Jalen Warren around, you can get him mixed up. You can have a 1A, 1B sort of deal. Same thing with the Chargers. In that case, you'd have sort of like this little committee going with Najee leading probably out the gate and Hampton taking over down the stretch. And then I think the other two, it's just like, well, who's here?
Exactly.
Like let him go, I guess. You know, like I don't know that he's going to go as high as 12, but I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it. Like, it's too high for me based off of, you know, where I have the player graded, but it's not too high in the sense of like, this team for 2 years has needed a running back. It's needed talent in the room. It trotted out Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. It cannot do that this year with Javonte and Miles Sanders. Yeah. It just can't happen. So they have to get somebody. And if this is the way that they secure a top talent in this draft class, then so be it.
Yeah, but, could be worse.
Right. So out of these four spots, I do think that I want to kind of say LA, because you understand the infrastructure there with the run game and all that. But, you know, then there's the Najee element where I almost kind of want to. Did you say you like the Broncos?
I like the best Broncos spot? The best. Yeah.
I think I agree with that, just because, you know, that offense was kind of shocking down the stretch last season, and it's an exciting team heading into next season, and they have a premier back.
They could have used a home run hitter in their backfield for sure. Yes.
So, all right. Well, that is, you know, we've arrived at this point where this amazing running back class is not just, you know, for dynasty purposes. We're talking about a second running back in the first round at this point, and pretty much unanimously. We will see how that, you know, unfolds over the next month as, you know, reports come in about where we should expect Hampton to go. But let's transition to the wide receivers for a minute, because there's two guys here. I'm going to start with Tetairoa McMillan, because that is, you know, from a pure wide receiver perspective, you and I still believe he is the wide receiver one of the class. But I'm just sort of like the landing spots that we see here are sort of indicative of the like nature of this player at this point in time, where he's kind of all over the place, like very differing opinions. So we have him as high as number 9 to the Saints. That was Connor Rogers. That mock came out today. So we still have somebody talking about him in the top 10. At once upon a time, that was the only spot you were talking about him. But that is his high point here, number 9. Then we have the Cowboys. The beat writers put him there at number 12. We have 2 Broncos. That is Mel Kiper and Kyle Krabs at number 20. And then DJ is the low man at this point, 22 to the Chargers. So 9 to 22 and all over the place in the middle of that. What's your read on McMillan?
My read on McMillan is that come draft day, I think people are going to be wanting McMillan. I don't think he's going to fall like past 15. I think somebody's trading up to go get him, because I think everybody kind of agrees that McMillan is the highest potential receiver in this class. I mean, you see it with the number 9 choice. You've seen all throughout the offseason, people have really liked McMillan in general. But due to the class, it's like, it's a little weird, and maybe you don't think he separates well, and maybe you think he has some flaws, a little slow, whatever. But this is the wide receiver to go after in this class, and if he starts to fall a little bit, I think someone's going to trade up to try to scoop him up. But I like number 9 to the Saints would be great. I think he pairs really well with Olave in that, and like even Shaheed, like that's a fun little trio. Got to find somebody to throw the ball, but like Derek Carr is fine for now, like to facilitate that. Cowboys would also be good. I think he'd pair well with CD. The Broncos, they him and Sutton kind of find themselves in a similar range in terms of skill set, but it's talented players. It's going to work. It's 2025. And then the Chargers, I mean, you can mock a wide receiver to the Chargers every year, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that he fits best, pure talent, like 10 to 15. Like, I don't think he needs to be a top 10 pick, because I don't think that's who he is as a prospect.
Agree.
And so I'm not necessarily like shocked or, upset that he's no longer being mocked in the top 10, because for as much as I love the player, I always thought the like top 6, 7, like when he was going to the Raiders and the Patriots at 4 and all that, like I still thought that was very high, given that he is a player that has legitimate, there are legitimate like obstacles for him. Like there are legitimate challenges. This is not a foolproof, number 1 wide receiver. Also, the Travis Hunter element, I think is still sort of like looming above all of our heads, because it's like, McMillan is the best wide receiver, but is he the best player that plays wide receiver in the draft? It's like, it's kind of hard to talk about it, but purely wide receiver grade wise, I do think it's still McMillan. And that said, I still would have him in this sort of teens range. But then what you end up finding is that in a lot of cases, he's falling into the 20s. We're no longer like finding value with like Dallas at 12, which is a spot that I do like quite a bit. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think they need to take a running back. They desperately need a wide receiver across from CD. So I think McMillan would make sense if he falls to that spot of the draft. And I think you'd have other teams, within the teens range that we've talked about as, potential wide receiver spots. Of course, Arizona, I don't know if it's the best like melding with him and Marv in terms of the skill overlap, but like obviously, like you said, just get good players at positions where you need help. I think Seattle at 18, that's a spot that would make sense if he starts falling down the board a little bit. So I definitely think there are spots here that would snatch him up if he starts to fall, where I don't think he would make it to 20, but I don't know. That seems to be where, the majority of folks see him going at this point. So,
and I don't hate him going 20 like that.
Yeah.
It seems a little late, but Also, I think we talked about that in the Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quinton Johnson, Zay Flowers. Like, we talked about them. Oh, there's probably going to be a run in the teens, and they ended up falling to like 21 through 24. And it's like, it doesn't really matter, but it just feels like when there's this one wide receiver, like that is pretty coveted, that likely will be coveted, that somebody will try to scoop him up before he ends up falling to a quote unquote like value spot.
And we'll talk about another wide receiver later that might be stealing a little bit of the spotlight that we probably not agree with very much, but we'll get to that. But let's talk about Travis Hunter next. This is the player that is going the highest in these mock drafts. Of course, we understand he will be a top 5 pick. The question is, how high will he go? And that, of course, still comes with the caveat and the question of what position will he be playing for that team. So in this case, we have his highest spot being the Kyle Krabs mock has him at number 3 to the Giants, which is something we haven't really talked about much. And then
now they have their quarterback.
Well, right, Jameis. It's the Jameis show now, so why not?
You need them. You need a guy to play offense and defense on offense.
Yeah, that's right. Get those tackle. Shoot him up the draft boards. He's going to be good for 1 tackle a game. We have 3 teams or 3 mock drafters that have him at number 4 to the Patriots. That is DJ, Kuiper, and the beat writers. And then Connor Rogers, interestingly enough, has him falling past the top 4 and landing with Jacksonville. So the Patriots were our perfect match, and that seems to be the general consensus here with, a pick or 2 higher, lower. But what do you think maybe about the Giants and Jags spots?
I think the Jags should scoop him. Like if he falls to 5, like that's a easy like smash draft. The Giants I haven't super considered because like they need quarterback so bad. They need so many things so bad that like I wouldn't hate if he went there. Like that it makes a ton of sense. And if they want to rock with Jameis for a year and just roll the dice on 2026, like that's fine too, because this quarterback class is a little iffy anyway. But I'm all for don't draft for team need, draft the best player. So like if you have Travis Hunter available for you, take him. And that's the Giants at 3. So be it. If that's the Jags at 5, like you go home feeling pretty happy.
Yeah, if he falls to 5, I mean it's a smash. Like they walk out like winners of the draft at that point. But it's like it's not out of like you could see it happening.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not like out of the realm of possibility that teams would prioritize. We see a couple of quarterbacks potentially go in the top 4, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, Abdul Carter went here, and maybe the Patriots need a.
Do you have Connor Rogers draft up? I want to know who went in his top 4.
So his top 4, Cam Ward, number 1, Abdul Carter, number 2, Shadur, number 3, and Will Campbell, number 4.
Okay. I mean, that doesn't seem insane.
Yeah. Like I could still see the Giants feeling the need to take a quarterback. Just, obviously Jameis is just Jameis.
The bridge, right?
It does make it so that they don't have to feel immense pressure to get a body in there at least. Like that's kind of, what that probably opens the door for them to not have to take Shadur at number 3, which I think you and I are maybe in agreement they should not do, especially when players like Travis Hunter are on the board.
Yeah.
But I was just reading through to see how these different mock drafts like put Travis Hunter, like, are they talking about him as a receiver? Are they talking about him as a corner or both? Kyle Krabs with the number 3 spot, kind of talking about him as both. Like,
okay,
you either stick him across from Malik Neighbors or you plug him into a revamped secondary. Like, either way works. It's like, well, that's fair. Yeah, it's scary for our purposes, of course. Like, you want to have that security that he's going to be playing mostly on offense. But and then I think the Patriots spots are typically more like leaning toward offense. A lot of mentions about getting Drake May a weapon. DJ talks about that.
I want that.
Yeah, I mean, that is why it's such an appealing spot for us, because you can really see him playing quite a bit on offense because of how desperately they need wide receiver help. And then the Connor Rogers pick with number 5, he calls it a unique situation. And he doesn't really elaborate beyond that.
Sounds like both.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be unique if he was just playing DB. Right. I think that chalks it up as both. And
to me, I think the Jacksonville spot, while it would be like amazing for them, I think he ends up playing mostly as a corner for Jacksonville, because that is such a need for them. And it's, they can use wide receiver help, of course, but like, you have Brian Thomas Jr., you have some other names in the room, at least, probably end up grabbing a guy later in the draft as well. But so I think, all of this said, the Patriots are still like, this is the spot for dynasty, for fantasy purposes. If we want to see him play wide receiver, I think it's the Patriots.
I 100% agree. I would love to see him go to the Patriots, just so we can see him unlocked to the fullest potential. I mean, you're talking about Mike Vrabel, a guy that played both ways a few times in his career as like a goal line tight end and a linebacker. I mean, I don't think he's going to be in the business of limiting Travis Hunter as an athlete.
All right, so shifting to tight end, Tyler Warren, who at this point in time, 4 out of 5 will tell you that Tyler Warren is going number 7 to the New York Jets. The black sheep here is DJ, who has him falling to 14 to the Colts. So this was really interesting to me, that 4 different spots would have Warren going 7 to the Jets, which makes sense, but like, for it to be this unanimous is a little bit like shocking to me.
No, I agree. When I saw this, I was like, sure, like I'm in for the Jets, but it feels like that's really early. First of all,
you think it's too early for him?
I don't think it's too early for Tyler Warren, but I think it's really high for a tight end in general. Like, I just feel like, and maybe like Brock Bowers and like clears the concern in the air for drafting a tight end high, and because the last time a tight end went this high is like Kyle Pitts, and like he went 4 in his year, right? And so like 7 just like seems like you're taking that leap. And this is a player that I think is worth taking the leap for, but it still gives you a little bit of pause. Now, him on the Jets with like Justin Fields as the quarterback, I don't know what the volume looks like there. Like, I don't know if they throw the ball 20 times a game. I don't know if they even get there. So if you're sitting here with, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Tyler Warren, whatever, like, I feel like you'd have a little bit of concern with the sheer volume of that offense. But again, take the best player and like work it out on the practice field, see what you can do with it. Because I mean, Tyler Warren can do so much more than just catch the ball too. So I think he'll be all right. Maybe he'll throw the ball to Justin Fields every once in a while. I could see it happening.
Totally. Actually, like, legitimately.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think this is not it's not too early, in my opinion, based off of what I think about the player. I think he is the sort of player, and it is within the like framework of this draft class as well, where we kind of understand like there's not a ton of top end talent in this class,
especially receivers,
and especially wide receivers. And I think Tyler Warren is a top tier talent. I think he is a tier 1 sort of talented player overall in the class. And as a pass catcher, I would say he is the most talented, not including Travis Hunter, the most talented, player that we have available. So in that sense,
you sound like you didn't want to say that.
That I didn't want to put.
That you didn't want to call him the most talented pass catcher in the class.
Who, Warren?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. It just felt like you didn't want to. It felt like you didn't want to commit yourself to that.
Well, I didn't want to like say that and be like, well, he's better than Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
But again, it's like there's a lot of layers to Travis Hunter. Purely grade wise, I've said it every week for the last month. This is my second highest graded offensive player in the draft class, behind Ashton Jeanty, which to me means he is my highest graded pure pass catcher in the draft. So in my opinion, 7 is not too high. However, 7 for a tight end just generally is a shocking spot. Like, this is not the sort of thing that just happens like ever. Like Brock Bowers fell into the early, like post 10, like 12, like he falls to 12 or 13. And you're like, what the hell? If Brock Bowers can't go top 10, like, are we ever drafting a tight end in the top 10 again? And then we come back and now suddenly it's unanimous that we're going to take Tyler Warren at number 7. So I don't know, based off of this being like, 4 people think he's going number 7, doesn't mean he's going number 7, of course, but I think it does paint the picture a little bit of just how well respected the talent is across the board at this point for Warren.
Yep, I'd agree. I think it's kind of cool that we've gotten to the point where we can say, like, Tyler Warren, another guy that's kind of like, he's a tight end, but he can do so many more things on a football field. And then again, I like him on the Colts at 14, Jeremiah. Yeah. Like, we don't want to leave that out of the conversation because maybe that's a more realistic landing spot. Like you said, Brock Bowers goes 13 last year to the Raiders, which it felt like it was a fall for him, but it also was like, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what everybody expected. But then he blows up and it's like, oh, who's the next Brock Bowers? And Tyler Warren just happens to be like a really good tight end prospect in the next draft class. So maybe there's a little bit of, like cruising off of that from last year. I don't know.
There is legitimately not a single team in between 7 and 14 that I wouldn't like Tyler Warren or couldn't see Tyler Warren getting drafted by. I think the weirdest one is the 49ers. Like, I think they're, obviously with George Kittle's getting older, so it wouldn't like be like out of this world for them to take somebody like Warren. But I think it would, like, they have a lot of other spots to fill. They're kind of in the middle of a rebuild. All of these other teams, the Panthers, maybe not the Saints anymore, but like, who cares? It's Juwan Johnson. Like, if you think he's the best player there, then take him. The Bears, I could see them, wanting to upgrade there. The Cowboys, like, you don't want to take a wide receiver. Why don't you take Tyler Warren? I mean, I get like Jake Ferguson's fine, but like, get an upgrade,
get a difference maker.
And then the Dolphins, I think that's a sneaky tight end spot. Maybe it's not a 13, but I think watch out for one of these later guys to maybe end up there. We saw what Jonnu Smith did for that offense last year down the stretch. Like, get a real playmaker, get a guy that can help in the run game like Smith can as well with Warren. And then obviously 14, it feels like that's kind of the floor at this point for Warren. But that whole stretch, man, he's going somewhere in there.
Yep. and it's going to be a lot of fun no matter where he ends up, because I'd like him to be somewhere more creative than the Jets. Who's coordinating the offense for the Jets these days? I know Aaron Glenn's the coach, but I'm curious because I'd like him. Like, the Colts is interesting because, I feel like you can do a lot of weird stuff with him, JT, and Anthony Richardson. But the Jets, I don't know like what they got going on. I guess it's kind of similar with Brees Fields and him. You can kind
of. Tanner Engstrand.
I think I'm out.
Engstrand. There's an N in there. He was an offensive assistant under Ben Johnson for the last 2 years.
Well, then I'm in. We're back. It was over. Now we're back. Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll see. I mean, like, it's going to be interesting regardless of where he goes because he's such a versatile, fun player.
Yeah. Let's talk about another versatile, fun player that is the least represented across our 5 mocks. He only made it into 3 out of the 5. And that is Emeka Egbuka. Quite an interesting spot right now with Egbuka, because I wouldn't even, I don't know how you feel necessarily, but like, I don't think he needs to be a first round pick. Like, yeah. I don't think I have him graded that way.
I don't have him that high. I am cool with him being a first round pick, but it feels like it's just the lack of receivers. You end up finding a receiver needy team in the first round, and Emeka Egbuka, he was a good receiver on the national championship team. Like, let's throw him on, whoever needs wide receiver. And I don't hate it. It's not something that I am against. And I think Egbuka has a really high floor. I just wonder, what the ceiling looks like. Not saying it's impossible that he becomes like a really reliable Godwin-esque player, but I think that's like the 100 out of 100 for him. I think like that's a reality that we don't live in most multiverses.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously like the player a lot, but I think we've been pretty clear about, what his limitations could be, his ceiling, which once upon a time I would have yelled at myself for saying that. But I think
I think I remember you saying that.
I hope that I have to eat those words at some point, but after 2 years of not getting back to that point, it starts to feel more and more like, okay, he's just a really good player, and that's fine. Like, he doesn't need to be a great wide receiver. So I'm not necessarily surprised to see that he's falling out of the first. And actually, I misspoke because Connor Rogers is pulling double duty, spoiler for later, but I have included the Rodgers landing spot here so we could talk about it, but he's only in the first round in 2 of these mocks. So Mel Kiper has him 23rd, the Green Bay Packers, which
not gonna happen.
We'll talk about that. Yeah. And then Kyle Krabs, 25 to the Houston Texans, which was our perfect match. But the beat writers and DJ did not include him in their first round. Connor Rogers did not include him in his first round, but he did have him going quickly into the second round, 38 to the Patriots. So we'll throw that in there as well. But what do you think about the 2 spots in the first round?
I mean, I like him on the Texans. The Texans would be a good landing spot. We talked about that in perfect matches. He lines up well. They need receivers right now. He pairs up really well with Nico Collins. Obviously, Tank Dell is going to be out for the season with his knee injury. Stephon Diggs is not going to be returning to the Texans, it seems. So Egbuka would fit really well there. And I like them reuniting him with CJ Stroud also. Like, that also makes sense. Packers is not going to happen. I don't know why people keep mocking wide receivers to the Packers in the first round. But say in a world that it does happen, it's like another one of those guys on the Packers that's like a solid wide receiver too, but like isn't an alpha and like plays in the slot, and like what's going to happen with Jaden Reed if that happens? You have a void to fill with Christian Watson's injury. Yes, I understand, but Egbuka doesn't fill that void. So I don't love it as a landing spot, even though like the Packers may need receiver. Like I don't love the fit.
Yeah, people have to stop. There was a point in time where I would talk myself into this. Like,
yeah,
JSN.
That was the last one. JSN was the last one.
Why not? Let it ride. Like, I don't know why we just continue to pretend. Like, I understand that it's a need. Obviously, I understand that. But we have learned over many, many, many years that this is just never going to happen. So I'm not even going to entertain the possibility of Emeka Egbuka being a Packer, because there is literally a 0% chance of that happening.
He also doesn't meet the like Brian Gutekunst thresholds of like what he wants in his players, which is another thing that you can figure out. Like there's a receiver that he would take if he would take a receiver in the first, and we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. So outside of the Packers, which, aside, I do agree with you. Like, he's, even if they were to take him, which they're not going to, like, I don't think he solves their problems.
How annoying would it be if like the one receiver he takes is Emeka Egbuka?
So let me say this. I would actually be happy if they took him. Like, I'm not trying to sit here and say like I'd be upset if they bucked the trend and like, wow, they really, because I legitimately believe that even though he's probably another one of those guys, I think he's the best one. Like, sure. I think he is the best one. Like, he can be the best receiver on this team. However, is he just the highest number 2 that they have? Yeah, that's the whole can of worms. But Houston, I continue to just love this spot. Like, we perfect matched it. It was maybe the easiest perfect match that we did. It's just perfect. And even if I don't think from a purely talent perspective, like pure grade wise, would I draft him at the end of the first round? Not necessarily. I think in this draft class, the door is open because of the lack of wide receiver talent in general. And maybe even, how quickly the draft class opens up, where you have guys that are second round grades that are going to be going in the first round because that's just what needs to happen. And I think Egbuka can be one of those players, surely. I think the Texans would be the spot. One spot that I've seen that we're not including today, but I want to bring it up, is the very next pick, the Rams. I think that's also a perfect fit for him. So I think you have spots in this like back half of the first round that are like good fits for his game.
I've also seen the Steelers at 21 as a pick, and like that's fine too. Like he fits next to DK and Pickens. He fits definitely next to, I mean, like, does he do a lot of the same stuff as Puka? Yeah, but so did Cooper Kupp, and they both worked. So right. I think it'd be fine. I do like the Rams pick.
Yeah, so he's an interesting one. Like, he'll be kind of one of the more wild cards, I think, of draft weekend, where, he might go way higher than people are thinking, like 21 to the Steelers, or he could fall into the second round and be this, 38 to the Patriots, like we saw with Connor's mock. And that's, there's plenty of teams at the top of round 2 that need a wide receiver. I don't think he'd fall very far if he got out of the first round.
Right.
All right. Second tight end. Colston Loveland. We have unanimously reached this point where Tyler Warren is celebrated as a top 7 pick at tight end in this draft class. Colston Loveland, not far behind. We have his draft range ranging from 14 to 22. 3 mock drafters have him going 14 to the Colts. That is Kuiper, Rogers, and the beat writers. Then we have DJ 18 to the Seahawks. That one's interesting. And then Kyle Krabs has him 22, reuniting with Jim Harbaugh, the team that you identified as your perfect match for Loveland when we did it. They're getting him in LA. So 3 out of 5 to the Colts, which has been sort of the Warren floor spot. But in this case, Warren's gone and Loveland's the next man up.
Yeah, this is that's the interesting pick is like if you can't get Warren, like do you just take the next guy and like that's Loveland and he's like a real good consolation prize, I think you would say. The one that is interesting is like obviously the DJ mock. Tyler Warren doesn't go to the Jets. He ends up going to the Colts at 14, but Loveland goes right off the board right after that to the Seahawks at 18. I think that would be an interesting world where like, you know, the Colts end up getting their guy, but Loveland isn't, you know, very far behind and they're kind of tied together. It would feel like, but all these spots, like I still like the Chargers the most. You get a little bit of the reunion with Harbaugh that they crossed over, and you get, you know, the Colts where it would be solid. I mean, we talked a little bit about that with Warren in the tight end position. I think he's a little less versatile than Warren, but he's more of just like a pass catcher. And I mean, most of Warren's fantasy value is going to come from that anyway, so it wouldn't be too much different. But you worry about the volume and like the quarterback position with the Colts with Richardson and what that's going to look like. The Seahawks, I mean, the Darnold experiment begins there, and obviously we saw he was good last year with the Vikings. Can he continue that? They definitely need pass catchers there right now. So I still like the Chargers the most, and it has to do with what we talked about before with Hampton. There's a infrastructure there that you can have faith in and you can trust, and I would feel better about that.
Yeah, with the Bengals no longer in this conversation, both with re-signing or signing T. Higgins to an extension and then re-signing Mike Gesicki, the Chargers is my favorite spot here, pretty easily. Like, for fantasy purposes, the Colts and maybe even especially the Seahawks are like really weird to me. And I think, you know, Loveland is a premier talent, and I 100% agree with him sort of quickly following Warren off the board. I really feel like these two are, you know, premier tight end talents. And we talk, you know, so much about Warren because of who he is, but I have Loveland graded right behind him. I still think if he went to the Colts or the Seahawks, there would be this like pretty intense acclamation period for fantasy people. Like anybody who drafts him in like the late first or the top of the second is going to be like ripping their hair out if he goes to either of those spots. Whereas I think the Chargers, that's like a pretty quick pathway, I think. Like, not only does he have the familiarity with the coach and, you know, assuming that there's, you know, some significant overlap with the concepts that he was running in college versus what he'd be running in LA, and the fact that they like to utilize the tight end. Justin Herbert likes to target the tight end.
Harbaugh loves his tight end.
Yeah. I mean, like I really hope that we get something like this where one of these guys falls, or maybe it's Warren falls like to the Colts, and then that opens the door for Loveland to fall to 22 and get to the Chargers, because I feel like if one of these tight ends goes to the Chargers, and at this point it's most likely would be Loveland or no one,
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty sizable like bump for fantasy.
Yep, I 100% agree. I would love to see him on that team. That would be pretty sick because he made like Will Dissly a thing, and that's tough to do.
Yeah, it really is. I had to play against Will Dissly that week, or one of those weeks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are at the end of our first round names, and we are ending with maybe the most controversial one.
Mm-hmm.
For our purposes, of course.
Yes.
And that is Matthew Golden, a player that you and I, Colin, agree is not a first-round wide receiver, much less potentially the first non-Travis Hunter wide receiver taken in the draft class, which is what we've seen in a couple of these mocks, or a few of these mocks, actually.
Yeah.
So we have Golden 5 different spots across 5 different mocks, starting at number 12. DJ, buddy, what are we doing? Matthew Golden, number 12 to the Cowboys. Wow. Then we have Kyle Krabs coming in 17 to the Seahawks. Next is Connor Rogers, number 20 to the Broncos.
18 to the Seahawks, by the way.
Oh, 18 to the Seahawks. Thank you. Number 20 to the Broncos. Kuiper has him 22 to the Chargers. And the beat writers put him at number 23 to the Packers. So 5 different spots, a lot of overlap. We talked a lot about these spots for pass catchers in general, whether they be tight end or wide receivers. But just the fact that he is a floor 23rd overall pick at this point is amazing to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is what happens when you run fast at the combine, I guess. Like, you get your draft inflated that much. He was really impressive at the combine and the workouts, like, cool. But we all saw him play. Like, we all watched the tape, and I mean, you and I came to the same conclusion. Obviously, we're not scouts and we're not in GM rooms, and we have differing opinions than these reporters, and maybe they're getting information from teams. But 12 seems really high, but also like when you're in a wide receiver class that doesn't have very many names and you're in desperate need of wide receiver and you're in a real salary cap predicament, like maybe you just take a shot and like take the most athletic receiver that has upside, and maybe you can mold him into a real number 2 besides CD. I see the vision, but it just feels so high for a player like this. And then, Seahawks, same idea, where like you just really need a receiver. You shipped literally everybody out except for JSN, and now you just need another guy to go next to him. And Golden makes sense next to JSN because JSN like isn't a speed guy. Broncos tell the tale again. It's Cortland Sutton and a bunch of people. Troy Franklin kind of fits the same vibe as Golden, ironically, but he just takes his job and does it better, I suppose. Chargers, you can continue mocking wide receiver to the Chargers every year. And then the Packers, this is the only wide receiver that the Packers would take in the first round, and it's not going to happen. But like, this is the Goody mold where like, it's got to be 9+ RAS, and he makes sense to fill the Christian Watson void of the deep threat. But I don't know. It just like it feels really high for Golden, and I don't know if that's plus EV for a team to do this.
Does he even fit the like size threshold for the Packers? Because like he's small.
It's a good question. I'll look on that while you tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the old saying is that the mock is done with the ears and the rankings are done with the eyes. All of that, we know all of that. I think there's something to be said here, just in the sense of if this is what the mock drafts are showing, there's probably enough buzz within the league that this is what we should expect. It's not even necessarily like, oh, DJ put him at 12. He loves Matthew Golden. Like, if there's one mock on this list that I know is being done with like NFL intel on the forefront, it would be DJ's mock. And I you could say the same thing, I'm sure, for Kuipers to a degree, Connor Rogers, Kyle Krabs, even like these are guys that have connections that they understand a little bit at least of kind of what's happening. So for everybody to come to this conclusion that we should expect him to be a top 20 pick essentially is, pretty telling of like, this is probably what we should expect on NFL draft night in the first round, which is just not at all what I would have, said a month ago, 2 months ago, especially like this meteoric rise that started with like somebody got into the Golden film after the playoff and all of a sudden the name was everywhere. And then he runs a 4.29 and it was like, this was the recipe to get him to where he is today. But I really strongly believe that the flaws and the areas of weakness on his film that translated directly into like solid but not great production across his college career. Like, that's the one part where I'm going to bring in production numbers, because like when the tape is like, yeah, you seem like fine, like he's good, but whatever. And then you're like a 600, 700 yard receiver in college. Like, okay, like, yeah, he's good, but like, he's not, I don't trust him to walk into the NFL and be like a difference maker, like quickly, if at all. So It is kind of shocking to see that this is where we've ended up. Now, I will say, purely looking at these spots from a fantasy perspective, you and I both have him outside of the first round, and like not really close, like middle of the second ish. Are there any of these spots for you that would like, that you would feel obligated to like raise him and put him into the first round?
I mean, Seahawks probably does it. Like their number 2 receiver right now is Jake Bobo. Like if Matthew Golden's on that team, he's going to get it targeted a lot. The Broncos like interests me. But I think like the Seahawks is the only one. Like it's high enough in the first round at 18 where, I mean, depends where McMillan goes, but he might be the first true wide receiver off the board. And he's, going before 20 and he's on a team that doesn't have a lot of wide receivers taking away targets. Like, makes a ton of sense. So I feel like the Seahawks at 18, I mean, if he goes 12 to the Cowboys, you think about it, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's really hard to sit here today and say that if he went 12 overall, that I would still rank him outside of my top 12 in the class. Yeah. Because for better or for worse, when the NFL talks, we listen. Mm-hmm. And that's how, it's how it should be. As much as you want to have conviction with yourself and what you've seen, it's like, if they were going to take him top 12, like, he probably fits into the top 12 of a dynasty rookie draft, like at the end of the day. But that being said, I'm having a hard time envisioning in any one of these spots that I would want to like bump him considerably. I think there are challenges. There's opportunities certainly in some of these spots, like you outlined, but I think equal to that is like, this is not a player that I would want to depend on early in his career. So if he's going to Seattle or he's going to Dallas and he is being like thrust into a starting spot immediately out of need, I think that actually hurts him long term. And so that's why it's kind of like, man, that's really like the worst case scenario almost. Like it feels like, oh, opportunity, high draft capital, like hell yeah. But like at the same time, I'm like, man, I don't want him getting thrown in immediately. Like I want him to kind of simmer a little bit. If he has a chance, I feel
but I also don't want him to go somewhere and just like become a deep threat. And like that's it for like his whole career. And not that I'm saying that's a bad outcome for him as an NFL player, but if you're talking about a dynasty league where you want to like have a guy come out of this class, like I don't love the idea of him going to the Packers at 23 and just like being maybe as good as Christian Watson and like being the number 3 option on most nights. Like if his ceiling is what Christian Watson is, like I don't know.
How much higher do you think his ceiling is than that?
I don't think it's much higher than that.
So
but
that's what I'm saying.
But I also don't think he can go number 12 to the Cowboys and other people do. Right. So like obviously there's people that see something in Matthew Golden that we don't. And like I would like to see that ideal scenario for Golden. And if that's as like the number 1.5 on the Seahawks and he's awesome, like I want to see that reality. I don't want to see him be Will Fuller. Will Fuller was really good, but like you know what I mean.
No, I get it, man. I'm rooting for every one of these players to have their best outcomes, to have their best career paths, and all of that. He's just a player that scares me a lot.
Yeah,
especially getting thrown in. And having to be a guy right away because I don't think he's ready. I don't. And people might disagree with that, but I don't believe that.
As for RAS for him and the Packers, he pretty closely lines up to Reed's measurables. Okay. Jaden Reed was 5'10", 190. He's 5'11", 191. But Jaden Reed was not number 23 overall. Yeah, and they don't take people in the first round that don't have high RAS, and he also isn't eligible for the RAS because he didn't do all the jumping and all that stuff, even though he would have been great. So, that's they're not taking him. I'll say that.
All right, let's transition to our post round 1 names, but of course, many of these names are guys we're still talking about in the first round of our dynasty rookie drafts. Our panel for this portion of the program, Connor Rogers is staying. He did a 3-rounder. Bless you, Connor. You fucking legend. We got him in, and we're bringing back some old friends from this part of the podcast. Chad Reuter's back, everybody. the one and only. I did see in this mock that he had Isaiah Bond going 32nd overall, and I almost cut him, and then I thought, I can't. It's just too good of a bit. Yeah. So we have Chad Reuter. Tankathon's back. We like Tankathon a lot. We use them to reference the draft order. They also put out mock drafts, so we have them included. That is an entity. There's no author attribution there. As is the new kid on the block for us, which is PFSN, Pro Football and Sports Network.
Sure.
Which is a real thing, I guess.
Yeah. We got to start putting out publishing our mock drafts on a website. That's
right.
What we got to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like this site has a simulator, a draft simulator. Yeah. They're trying to take on PFF. And I'm like, I've heard of you this morning when I found out you did a 7-round mock draft. But
I'm sure there's people listening that are like, I've never heard of that in my life.
So they're the wild card here. We'll determine if they are, coming back next year or not based off of what they did with these players. But let's start with Kaleb Johnson. This is the guy, we have him top 5 as a dynasty rookie player, but we've talked a lot about, he has such a wide range of outcomes, I think, versus everybody else in this class because of how he tested and how little public sentiment there really is. We don't really have an idea of where he's going to go. Well, this will give us some idea. We have a pretty wide range, like we talked about last week. High spot, 39 to the Bears. That was Tankathon. That's the spot we talked about on Perfect Matches. PFSN has him 51 to the Broncos. And then we have 2 with Rodgers and Reuter 67 to the Browns, which is impressive when a player is getting matched in round 3 of the draft.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty impressive. But so for all the way from the top of the second into the early part of the 3rd round for Kaleb Johnson.
Yeah, I think that he's a second round talent, but with the depth at the running back position, I totally understand if he ends up falling out of that, top 2 round thing and ends up in the 3rd round. It doesn't mean that he's a bad player and that you have to avoid him at all costs. He didn't, he's still a day 2 guy, and you can, still bank on the talent. And I think all of these spots are really good, and that's why they end up here. You say, oh, this running back class is so deep, we can wait to take running back, and then you actually do, and then you end up with a guy like Kaleb Johnson. You wait till 51 if you're the Broncos. Like, that's great. He's a guy that can lead your backfield, and you're getting him at 51. Same with 39. You pass on Jeanty at 10, end up getting him in one of your high 2nd round picks, and then the Browns, you can find their successor, run with Jerome Ford in that backfield in Cleveland. So I like all these spots. It makes sense process wise. You don't want to leverage those really high picks for a running back. You still get a really talented player this late.
Man, this Bears spot, like, this is so, I need this. Like, and I realize.
What if they take them both?
Right. Hey,
Ben Johnson can make it work.
Right. They know how to use 2. That's probably what he prefers, actually. But if they don't get Jeanty at 10, and I realize I could say this about probably several backs and it would work here, but Johnson in particular, I think, is such a good fit based off of, like, he's David Montgomery. Like, to a degree, he can be that sort of player in this offense. Like, they can find their, electricity somewhere else at some point down the line, but I don't even think they need that. Like, I don't think we need to have like a Montgomery Gibbs here for this thing to work. Like, I think Johnson is the sort of player, his skill set will line up so well with how this offense wants to run. And so I really hope that happens and that he is that high 2nd round pick that you and I think that he should be based off of his talent. Now, that being said, if he does fall, like you said, because of the depth of the class and other more athletic players getting prioritized, there's so many good running back spots.
Yeah.
And like, I couldn't be upset about either one of these. The Broncos, obviously, we've talked about that plenty. They need a running back, and whoever they get will be, boosted for fantasy. And meanwhile, the Browns are, that sneaky kind of running back spot that we talked about with Omarion Hampton on perfect matches. I think if Johnson falls into the 3rd round and the Browns snatch him up, I mean, he's not going anywhere on my dynasty draft board.
We've said so many times that we need one of these running back classes to come in because we need like the turnover to happen into a new kind of quote unquote era of running backs. But this is why, because you come into these drafts and it's like there's so many talented running backs and they are all landing in good spots. Like, you will probably see 1 or 2 of these guys go to a spot that you don't love, but there's going to be so many good spots that need a running back filled in this draft.
And we'll keep talking about a few of those in a little bit. But before we get there, Luther Burden III, who does not make our 1st round portion of this because not a single mock drafter included him in their 1st round.
Shocking.
He is a unanimous post round 1 player at this point. But what's interesting about Burden is that he doesn't get far outside of round 1. And actually 3 out of our 4 mock drafters have him in the same spot, which is the Titans at 35. Tankathon has him a spot earlier, 34 to the Giants, but the rest of our 3, Rodgers, Reuter, and PFSN, have him 35. So right fresh out of the 1st round, but what do you think about the Titans spot?
I don't hate the Titan spot. I mean, Cam Ward, if he goes number one, is going to need a reliable guy that he can go to. I think Calvin Ridley's still there, but outside of that, like even Nick Westbrook-Akine's out of there. So like they could absolutely use a number one kind of guy for Ward. And we are both like, we don't really know if Burden is a number one coming out ready-made, but like I think that he has the talent to eventually turn into that guy. Maybe like bulk up a little bit, add some weight, and then like you can take a little more hits and be a really good yards after catch receiver because he has good juice and he's a good route runner, and he was in a really bad situation I think last year. And so I like him going here, maybe falling out of the first a little bit, having some of those expectations kind of pulled back a little bit and, ready to roll. I mean, I like the Giants too. They obviously need another receiver, and it'd be quite good, I think, for fantasy value because like Jameis is a pump and dump kind of fantasy quarterback where Malik Neighbors is going to have like 2,500 yards, and then whoever the second guy is just going to be a benefactor because Wan'Dale Robinson was like a pretty valuable fantasy asset, and Luther Burden's just like souped up Wan'Dale. So I think you'd be all right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually like that quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, I'm not ruling out that he's still a round one player in a month's time. Like that is very much still in the cards, but not according to these folks.
I think it's wild that Matthew Golden's going 12 and Burden can't make it in the first round.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. But doesn't make any sense, but
not my mock draft.
Who are we? All right. Back to running backs. Quinshon Judkins, who has, surged here a little bit. You have sort of ignited your love from the summer and from the Ole Miss days and really like stuck him into the middle of the first round. I did give him the bump here over, some of the other backs in the class more towards the end, a part of round one for Dynasty. In this case, another wide-ranging player in these mock drafts. We talked about maybe he even sneaks into round one based off of his combine. But in this case, his ceiling was 44 to the Cowboys, and that was Connor Rogers. Then we had 55 to the Chargers with Chad Reuter's mock. And then Tankathon having him 61 to the Commanders, which is bottom of round 2. And then 69 to the Patriots, nice. Just outside. Yeah, nice. Right outside of round 2. But so these are not new spots. We've talked at length about each one of these spots, I think, for running backs. Maybe, well, not the Commanders, but what do you think here about this gamut?
This is a pretty wide range for Judkins. I mean, 44 to 69 is like, 25 pick difference, but yeah, he falls somewhere, in that late to third round kind of range because he was a shared backfield guy in college, and maybe you feel that way about him. I think he can lead a backfield in the NFL. I think that there's no doubt about that. I was looking back on my rankings real quick. The lowest I ever put him was 6. I'll just for full transparency. I had him at 1, I had him at 3, and then I've had him at 6 ever since. So that's. I
don't know why it seemed like you had a reawakening moment last week when we.
We rekindled a little bit, we found love again, but I think like the Cowboys again, we can rehash it, but that's a great spot. Chargers would be a little bit weird. The Commanders, I feel like there's a little bit of overlap with Brian Robinson, but like Judkins is much more of like an athlete and much more dynamic than Robinson, so I think that'd work out. And then the Patriots can use guys. Like it doesn't really matter who it is, but like if Judkins is at 69 for them, like hell yeah, let's go. And if they, you get some real pieces around Drake May with him and one of these receivers, that'd be real good.
Yeah, we perfect matched Judkins to the Cowboys, I believe, and
Yep.
it was, I still want that to happen. I think 44 makes sense for the talent here. I think that's where he belongs in that sort of range of the draft. And I think as long as they don't take one at 12, they probably should take one at 44. Like, It's one or the other. I don't think you can do the Jonathan Brooks thing again, where you're like waiting and then, the whatever, Jerry spills the beans and then you have Rico Dowdle. Like, they need a running back. I don't care what the state of the team is. I don't care, how many other needs they have. Like, it's a desperate need for them. And Brian Schottenheimer wants to run the football. They need a running back in that room to help execute his scheme. So I'm really pulling for that. I really don't like the Commanders spot at all. Like any running back that were to go to the Commanders, I don't know that I would love that. It's just messy. It's a busy backfield. But of course, we've talked plenty about the other ones. I like those. I don't think he falls to 69, but if he does, I mean, that would be a hell of a win for the Patriots.
Right.
Well, let's keep talking about running back, and in most cases, the same landing spots with TreVeyon Henderson. The only new one here for Henderson is the Broncos. And that's compared to Judkins, but we have talked about the Broncos, of course, with other running backs. But Henderson's range starts at 44 as well in two of these mocks. Reuter and Tankathon have him going to the Cowboys in that spot. It's Rodgers who has him to the Broncos at 51, and then the low spot is PFSN, which has him 65 to the Chargers. So again, a lot of the same spots, different players. We expect all of these teams will walk out with a running back at some part of the early, day 2 of this draft. But in terms of the Cowboys, who would you prefer there? I mean, I know we perfect matched Judkins, but when you look at it like this, do you prefer one of these over the other?
That's a good question. I feel like I like Judkins more as like a 3-down guy. I don't know if Judkins is a pass catcher, but I feel like he can be a player that can carry the load more than TreVeyon can. And that has to do with play style, yes, but it also has to do with like age and injury history. Like, I think that also plays into it, where Henderson has had like some foot injuries and he's a little older as a player and he has a little more miles on him. But I think I would rather have Judkins than Henderson.
Yeah, I'd prefer Judkins in Dallas for sure. Just because I agree. I think they need a back that can play, across the board, and there's nobody else there to help. Whereas I think TreVeyon may need a 1B or even a 1A potentially alongside of him.
He's the Commanders guy.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that. I think that makes sense. Like, the Brian Robinson and him would work well together. They have
or the Chargers guy.
Exactly. I'm actually thinking the Broncos too.
Sure.
Because
him and Estime?
Right. And in that case, he can be the obvious 1A.
Right.
Like, he can be the guy. Well, like, Estime is like your between the tackles, like, goal line, and maybe for fantasy then that ends up being kind of a nightmare. But I still don't think Henderson is a great between the tackles runner. So I think he needs that. Like, he needs one of those sorts of backs alongside of him. So I think the Broncos make sense. The Chargers, like you said, makes sense. Commanders even. Like, these are spots where I'd like Henderson. Whereas Judkins, I think you can trust him to kind of do everything.
Yeah, I think he's more like, I understand TreVeyon, very good pass protector, good pass catcher. He can hit the big one and be your speed guy and a little more than that. Like, he's more than just your kind of gadget, get it and go running back. But I just think like Judkins has more of the short yardage gene, the goal line gene, like the quote unquote like pure running back kind of thing that everybody hates. But I'll still put the tag on Judkins that he's more of a pure running back than TreVeyon is. We can.
All right. Well, there are plenty of other names that we could dive into here, but that feels like the right time. We've covered 12 names. Our top 12-ish players. I don't think everybody was represented in there, but one month from right now is when all of this is gonna become real. And I think you and I here, like diving into some of these, like honestly, there's a few where I was like, man, that kind of makes a lot of sense. Like I haven't really thought about that, but I kind of like that. So it is fun to sort of explore all of the different avenues that these players could end up going down in the NFL for better or for worse. And also to just see kind of the temperature, because we're talking about our rankings in the context of Dynasty and our, grades on the class. But then, there's this whole Matthew Golden thing that just isn't going away. So we have to talk about him too.
Yeah, it's interesting because usually our rankings end up being pretty close to like the NFL's rankings of things. No, not trying to like flex or anything, but like then you see something like, the Matthew Golden Luther Burden split, and it's like, maybe we got to get back in the lab and see what we're missing, but also, you get into the season and see how it transpires, and then maybe you can be like, hey, I don't know what they were thinking.
I don't like to be like this. I really don't. But Matthew Golden feels like an industry plant.
I like that. It really did. Like, it seems like a pump and dump project, like cryptocurrency kind of thing, where like, Matthew Golden came in like after the season. Nobody was talking about Matthew Golden during the season. He came in after the season and it was like, dude, Matthew Golden, watch out. And then like he runs 4.29 and now here we are. And it's like, he's going to go number 12. How did we get here?
Like I said, no disrespect. I like the player. I'm rooting for the player. But like, that's the big takeaway for me from this episode is like Matthew Golden hype train. Like, where did it come from? Why is it happening? But you know what? I'm also providing plenty of ammunition for when Matthew Golden is like the breakout rookie of the season next year for people to come back to this podcast and pull these sound bites and throw them in my face. And I hope you do that because I will deserve it at that point. But
I hope you don't do that to me because I have fragile emotions.
All right, well, this was the beginning of our path to the draft, which means that we are going to continue rolling on the path to April 24th, Green Bay, Wisconsin, round 1 of the NFL draft. And that continues next week with one of my favorite episodes of the year, which is this or that. The comps episode, the one time that Camp Dynasty puts out comps into the universe, but man, they are a little bit tongue in cheek. So don't come expecting anything too crazy if you haven't seen this or that or listened to this or that before, but it's a good time. So I'm looking forward to it.
Justice for Devin Neal, people.
Seriously, what the hell? PFSN did a 7-round mock and didn't include him. I'm going to choose to believe they just forgot him. Because that's egregious.
Sending him an email.
Yeah, you should. You really should. But if you enjoyed,
leader of the Devin Neal fan club,
you should get like a badge or something. Devin Neal might actually respond to you at this point.
Yeah, seriously. I text his mom sometimes. Okay, how's Devin doing?
If you enjoyed our breakdown of some of the top and some of the not so top mock drafts in the industry today and where our dynasty rookies might end up in 1 month's time, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty. More importantly, make sure you subscribe and like if you are on YouTube. Comment down below. Let us know what you thought of the episode, what you disagreed with, how much you love Matthew Golden, and how much you want us to kick rocks. Please comment that down below. We welcome it, even if it's going to make Colin cry just a little bit. And if you're on the pod feed, be sure to like, rate, review, follow, or share the pod feed because we appreciate that as well.
If you're going to do a controlled burn, make sure the wind conditions are correct, people.
Yeah, our resident firefighter here at Camp Dynasty. If the surrounding area goes up in flames, I know who to call before it gets to the cabins here. So
we take care of business.
Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.